Hi, today you're going to join me in class to hear a interview with an application developer from London. His name is Rob Joseph. He has a podcast and he's met a lot of people on his own. But we're going to ask him some questions about his job as a freelancer. So he's going to tell us about how to get a job as a freelancer, some of the places that you might want to work for and others that you wouldn't, some of the benefits of the flexibility and the pay, which is surprisingly good, and then we'll also cover some of the topics of about education and your qualifications and how to get these jobs. So the audience here is my students. So this is at the university. And so people that are kind of at the beginning of their career are looking at how to become successful. And so that's why we have Rob talking to us today. So let's hear him. And of course, the subject today is we're talking to Rob about a career, and he's got kind of a unique experience. So let's just start with the first question. So, Rob, introduce yourself. What do you do, and how do you make a living?
Sure. So I'm Rob. I'm an Android developer as a hobby since 2011 and professionally, quote unquote, since 2012. And so that is what I do. I build Android apps. I'm a freelance app developer. So I've only ever done freelance app development work. I have never had a full-time or permanent position doing it. And that is how I make my living. If you've got questions that you want to dig into further, then we can go for that. But at the Cliff Notes, that's basically what I do, and that is how I make a living.
All right. So, tell us maybe an example of one or two apps that stand out as what you've done in the last few years. Maybe a client that you've worked for.
Sure. So a lot of the work that I would say 90% of the work that I've done has been with startups. So usually funded, and they get in a team of developers, or on occasion one. So I might be the sole developer, but for the most part, you're a team of like maybe three or four. And some of the more interesting ones, I've worked on some social networks. So the first proper gig that I got was for a sports social network. And they had a lot of funding, and I think I was there for 9 months. And I'm pretty sure they thought they were going to be like this sports Facebook. And there was a lot of, at the time, I remember there was a lot of buzz, and they got some celebrities on board and that kind of thing. So that was a fun project to work on. And then I think after I left, it was not because I left, just in coincidentally after I left. It didn't go the direction they wanted, but I think it's still going, but it's just it's not, they're not the next big thing. And then, so I've worked on a bunch of projects like that. The most recent one I worked on was for a company called Dressed. So if you're into fashion and kind of fashion apps, then they'll be launching properly, I think this month or next month. I just finished up. So I was there for about 18 months building out their Android app. And I finished up about 2 weeks ago, actually. And like you were saying, Shad, just in terms of, when you get, we're going in a different direction. So I was there for 18 months building out the Android app. And then they realized that they basically wanted to launch on iOS and then figure out the Android app once they've got their MVP down. So that was one of those conversations where it's like, thanks for all your hard work, but we're going a different direction. And they pulled the app. So that was fun. But on the contrary, it was actually a really good company to work for. It was 100% remote. So the only time I ever went to the office pre-COVID was for the occasional meeting. And then post-COVID, I haven't been to the office probably. Well, I don't think I've been to the office this year. So those are some of the more interesting ones I've worked for.
Sure. Now, when a person says they're working freelance, the first thing that comes to mind is that you're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to quote prices out for things. You have
Yeah.
a customer that might or might not pay you. You don't know, but that's not really what you're doing. What describe to you what your ideal work situation is and what you're always trying to find?
Sure. So I would say there's two types of freelancing. So one, they're both freelancing, but one is you get paid to build a project, which is what you're talking about, which is, hey, I've got this idea for an app. Here's some money. Go build it. Give it to me in 3 months' time. And then that's the case where you're going at and you're pitching yourself and saying, hey, I do this and I can build this, and you have to go and find your clients. And then the other type of freelancing is what I do, which is contract work, which is there's a client somewhere that needs a iOS or an Android or a backend or whatever it is developer to work on their project, or maybe they need a few of them. And so they basically put out job advertisements the same way as you would a permanent job, but it's freelance work. And then the way that those work is I'll get approached by a company or a recruiter. Most of them find me through LinkedIn now. So it's less sales and more people coming to you and saying, hey, can you do this? And then, you know, you have an interview, which will be just like a regular interview. They ask you some questions. A lot of the time when you're a freelancer, it's different than a permanent employee in the sense that they don't really ask you like, can you do the job? They assume because you're a freelancer, you must have the experience and the knowledge to be able to do it. So it's more just like a conversation, like, could we get along? And then the work that I do is, you know, you get a contract which lasts for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. Like I said, the last one was, it started off for 6 months, then it got extended by 6 months, and then it got extended again by 6 months. And what you do is you basically go in and work on whatever it is they hired you to do. So for this one, they hired me to work on their Android app. I wasn't the only developer. I think at the most there was 6 of us, but that's usually the way it works. But those are the differences between the two. And also the other difference would be when you get the kind of fixed rate project, a lot of the time you're left to go and do it. So, you know, here's my idea, go build it, give it to me in 3 months. When you work on contracts, it's more like, we want you to do this and we want you to work on it 5 days a week as you would a normal employee. Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up.
So then you mentioned earlier that you probably aren't ever going to look for a job where you're on a paycheck and work for 10 years at one company. Why do
Yeah.
you prefer to keep doing these short-term contracts?
Um, for me, freedom, like 100%. Like we were talking earlier, and I was saying like I like to travel. So the last contract I did was 18 months. That's the longest contract I've ever done. Normally, well, pre-COVID, I mean, most of my experience really is pre-COVID. COVID is like a freak thing that's happened, and you know, no one knows how to handle it. But pre that, it would be, I get a contract for 3 months or 6 months at the max. And then when I'm done with that contract, I won't work for 3 months and I'll go travel. And then when I come back, I'll get a contract for 3 months, and then I won't work after that for 3 months. And maybe, you know, I'm working on my own apps, or I'm working on side projects, or I go travel. So the main reason that I don't do it is, one, because of the freedom. Like even this contract that I've just finished, it was all remote. So like, yes, they want me to be working on this app 5 days a week, but they had no hours. So as long as I'm available for meetings when they schedule meetings, the rest of the day I can be doing whatever I want. I can go to the gym, I can take the dog for a walk. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing is, you get paid way more being a freelancer than you get paid being a permanent employee for doing the exact same job. So like I get approached probably once a year by Facebook. They send me an email, like one of the engineers sends me an email and they're like, hey, we found your profile, or we found one of your apps. Are you interested in coming to interview at Facebook? And like, it sounds really cool, and it would be really cool to tell people I work at Facebook, but economically and for my lifestyle, it wouldn't make sense. Like it would be a cool badge to wear, but you'd be taking a huge pay cut to do the same job that you could be doing for someone else with a lot more flexibility.
So give us an idea then of kind of a range, because here in the United States, we see New York and San
Yeah.
Francisco. The coasts are like insanely expensive to live and
Yeah.
insanely high salaries. We live in Phoenix, Arizona, which is kind of a medium-sized, market for everything,
Hmm.
reasonable prices and not so rich jobs either. I mean, it's not bad,
Yeah.
but it's certainly not San Francisco. Does London compare to like New York? Is that kind of an idea that we're thinking of?
London would be our equivalent of a New York or a San Francisco for sure. Like the prices to live are ridiculously high. The prices to buy a house are ridiculously high. You get charged tax, like just driving in London, you have to pay to drive in London. It's ridiculously expensive. And then the salaries are, for the most part, if we're talking about app development, they're pretty competitive. They're pretty good. But if you took a salary and like, to give you like some a more accurate idea of numbers. And like I said in the podcast episode, like I don't know the specific numbers in different regions of the world, but I could tell you that if in London, a good salary, like a really good salary for us for an app developer would be, let's say, £90,000 a year. That would be like a high salary. And a day rate for a freelance contractor of the same equivalent level of experience would be about £500 a day. So straight away, you make so much more money being a freelancer than you do being a permanent employee. And like, while those numbers might not scale, like $90,000 in New York might not be a high salary, but whatever is a high salary, then you just amp up what the day rate of a contractor is, and it's suddenly so much more money anyways.
So when you're talking about pounds, we should be probably, what is that, 1.5 times in dollars then? So
It was the last time I checked, yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
I think no, I think it's like 1.2. I don't.
oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, let's say if it's 90,000, it's probably like $120,000. But then if it's £500, that probably translates to about $700 or $800.
So that's pretty good money, 700 or 800 a day. So I think most of us
Yeah.
here would take that, you know. All right. So do you have trouble when you're like in that lag time between jobs? Do you ever feel like you're not going to get the next one? How do you, is there some uncertainty there?
That's a really great question. I think I would say for me, 100% no. The market, like I've heard people say, oh, the market's quiet, this, that, and the other. But I've been doing it since 2012, and there probably hasn't been one day in the last 5 years that there's not an email in my junk box from a recruiter saying, "Hey, we've got this contract. Are you interested?" So for me, no. Like contract work itself, there's so much of it. App development work itself, there's so much of it. Like you can't have a technical product these days and not have an app to go with it. And then if it was an occasion where the market's in a slump and people don't have money to hire freelancers, well, they're hiring permanent staff. And if you've got the experience of being a freelancer, then at the very least the fallback is you could get a really good job as a permanent member of staff, because you've got bills to pay and stuff, and you might be in a tough situation. So for me, like, no. I know there are people that they like the continuous money coming in, continuously working. They don't want to be in a position where, I've took 3 months or 6 months off and now I'm afraid about getting my next job. But I think also that just comes down to like lifestyle. Like I don't live to my means. So, if I need to, like, I've got savings. So if I can't get a job for the next 6 months, I'm good. If it goes past that, I get a permanent job. Like, to me, there's no issue there.
All right, give us an idea of why you're into app development. Is there like a huge market for web developers and a smaller chunk of people that are looking for, focusing on apps? Is it kind of a niche, a specialty, or is it just something that everybody does? What's your feel there?
Um, so I'm an app developer because I bought an Android phone in 2011, and I read an article on Lifehacker that said this is all the things we would want the best to do app ever to do. And in my dumb brain, I was like, well, this is a blueprint to make $1 million to do app. So I'm going to learn app development. I'm going to build this app. It's going to be the best to do app ever. And then, I'm going to be rich. So that's how I got started. And it was just kind of like, I didn't build the app. I tried. I was not good enough by any chance to build what they were talking about. But that's how I got started. But I just really enjoyed it. And, we use our phones all the time. I find it super cool that I can have an idea for something personally, and I can jump on my computer and a couple of days later I've built it and it works. And then I really like the idea that the barrier to entry to share what you build with other people is super low. Like if you're an Android developer, I think the Play Store subscription fee for like lifetime subscription fee is $25. So you spend $25, you can publish whatever you've built on the App Store. And even if one person downloads it, it's so cool that somebody's giving you feedback like, hey, you built this thing and I'm using it. So that's how I got into it. But in terms of the market, I've not noticed, like everywhere I've worked, there's been web developers, there's been backend developers, there's been security guys, there's been like all different iOS developers. So I've never, I mean, I don't think I've ever worked anywhere that hasn't had other kinds like that, but I've also never worked, like I've never seen that I don't feel like there's no need for it, I guess is the best way that I could put it. Like apps are here, like phones are here, somebody's building them and they're not going away. So regardless of whether it's Android or iOS or something else, like there's always going to be that next thing. And I don't think it's ever going to go back to the days where everything is a web app and, we're all playing Flash games and things like that.
Do you ever develop
Sorry, so to your point as well, I was going to say a lot of the really good developers that I've worked with, they actually used to be web developers that built Flash games, and then Flash died and they had to make the transition to iOS or Android. So I also feel like that shows that that's the direction that things are going.
Okay. Do you feel like you have any skills that will make you a web developer, or is this pretty much a silo that you're in that's a specialty?
That's a great question. I think learning any programming language gives you really good skills to go and learn a different one. So whether you build apps, like the difference between when I talk to backend developers that I've worked with, and they're like, hey, you can go and do this thing and it will fix, like, you, when you have an issue that could be fixed on the back end or you could be fixed on the front end, a front end developer is always going to say fix on the back end, and a back end developer is always going to say fix on the front end. And we don't understand each other's worlds, right? Because they don't understand that when you're building for an app for a phone, you have to worry about battery life, you have to worry about CPUs, you have to worry about have they got a good network connection, because they can't do all the things like telling the developer, right, just contact the API 15 times while you're playing this game. Like, you can't do that, because if I'm on 2G or I lose network, then the game dies. But at the same time, on the back end, we don't have any concept of, they just can't infinitely be spinning CPU cycles and paying for that, because the whole company is going to die. So you have to have that trade-off. But I think what the difference is that both of us have skills in programming, and all you have to learn is that bit where, if I'm a backend developer and I want to learn apps, I have to learn the language, but I know a programming language and I understand how it works. So it's just learning syntax, and then I have to learn what's the difference between programming for the back end and what's the difference between programming for the front end. And that's when, like, screen size and memory usage and all that thing comes into play, and vice versa. So, like, if apps went away today, like, I know programming, so I could go and learn Python, or somebody could go and learn web development, or, HTML and CSS is the most basic thing in the world. So really, if you got good at that, like, CSS is super easy when you know nothing about it. And I know when you're a web developer, the stuff they do in CSS will blow my mind. But I know that when you have one skill, you could go and do something else. So I don't feel like it puts you in a box. It just gives you really good experience in that box.
All right. So here's another question about whether we're wasting their time or not, because all of us here that are looking at you are at the university.
Yeah.
We're taking 4 years to get a degree. We're spending a lot of money
Yeah.
for tuition.
Yeah.
We're getting smarter. We know how to program in various languages. We know how
Yeah.
algorithms work. We can everything about operating systems and artificial intelligence. We got a huge list of things, but
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you're pretty successful. And I didn't hear anything about you going to school.
Sure. So I mean, I have opinions on education as a whole. So to give you my background, so our equivalent here of middle school, high school, I did computing, which was, I don't remember the languages. It was like Visual Basics or something like that. It was really old programming languages. And the stuff you built was super basic, but that's what got me interested in programming. And then I did a computer science degree. And again, like, I don't know how it works there in the States, but in the UK, there's no register when you go to a lecture. So I went to very little lectures. The only ones I went to were the programming ones. There was very few of those. A lot of it was theory. And like, I did okay, but the stuff that I do day to day in Android, and when I started learning it, was basically from scratch. Like, the only advantage I had was that I understood how an object oriented programming language worked. And then after that, it was like free for all, learn everything yourself. And I couldn't pick one thing that I do today that I got from education. But I also did my degree before. I think I finished my degree in 2011, and I think the iPhone didn't come out to 2007. And I'm pretty sure when I left in 2011, there was still no mobile app development courses. So even if I wanted to go to school to learn that, I couldn't. But I wouldn't say people are wasting their time, because I would say for sure everybody on this call right now knows more about programming outside of Android than I do. They, like, you guys. So for example, the Facebook thing that I mentioned earlier, a couple of years ago, I was interested. So I was like, yeah, I'll be interested. I'll interview with you guys. And so you have the first stage is a technical interview where they gave you a link to a website, and then they give you tasks and they watch you code. And I had no idea the answer to any of their questions. They were like, can you, sort this binary list, and can you give us the log n of, and I have no idea. Like, even now, I would imagine you guys, in terms of the theory and all these other things, know way more about it than I do. And if you want to get a job at Facebook or Google, I think that will lend itself really well. If you want to learn it yourself and you don't mind, taking 6 months to learn something and getting a low-paying gig and then just rolling on from there, then that's your choice. But I wouldn't say, the only thing I would say is that, as a whole, the programming industry, in my opinion, is the only industry that is 100% a meritocracy. Like, when you go for an interview, nobody cares what university you went to. Nobody cares if you have a degree. Nobody cares if you learn whatever it is that you do on YouTube. They just, like, I've done interviews for companies that I worked for, like interviewing candidates that are going to be on my team. And like when I look at the CVs, the only thing I look at is, do they have the skills that they can do the job? That's it. I don't care about anything else, and I've not worked with anyone else that does. So I would say like it's definitely an advantage in terms of the knowledge that you have over me, but it's not a necessity.
All right. So all of us here are going to graduate and we'll have lots of knowledge, but really no experience. Is it possible
Yeah.
for anyone in the classroom here to start like you're doing with a contract and go in as a temporary worker and get the higher wage, or is getting a full-time job the better way for a new student to look for?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like you know what my answer might be to that. But the answer that I will give is, if you graduate today, within 6 months, you guys could be doing freelance gigs. I would say like junior to mid, because that's what you're going to get. You're not going to go straight into a high level one, but junior to mid is good pay. And within 6 months after that, you could be getting like top dollar. And the reason that I say that, and this is what I tell everyone, is that every job that you go into after university, you have zero experience. It doesn't matter what the job is. Like if you're going to be a lawyer or whatever, right? You have zero experience in that specific role because you've just come out of university, and you have this catch 21 where it's like, well, we want to employ you, but we want someone that's got 1 year's experience. So how are you going to get 1 year's experience if no one's going to employ you? But when it comes to programming, you don't have to wait for people to get experience. You just have to build stuff. That's it. Like if you're a web developer, go build websites, publish them. They're on the internet. Anybody can go and look at them and be like, oh, hey, cool. He's done this website. He knows, like, he looks like he knows what he's doing. I want a website that looks just like that. And then the same thing with apps. Like I started with zero experience as an app developer, and my first contract was a freelance contract. And the reason that I got that was because I had apps that I'd built for myself that I published on the Play Store. So when people were asking me like, hey, have you got experience? I would just be like, yeah, hey, I've got this one, I've got this one, I've got this one. And like, luckily for me, they had good reviews and they had a decent amount of downloads. But people are really impressed in terms of app development when, if you've got a candidate that has theory experience, so they can tell you, you know, I know Kotlin, I know Java, blah, blah, blah. And then you have another candidate who's saying the exact same thing, but they can also present that, oh, and I've built these things with it, then you're already in a much better position than everyone else. So I would say like 100% yes. And the way that you do that is build your own experience.
Very good. Hey, by the way, if you got questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to those.
Yeah.
Here's the next thing coming up is the idea of a. I guess I was thinking about the difference between a Android developer and an iOS developer. Do you work on teams that have both of those, or is
Yeah.
one harder than the other? Or do you do both, or do you know anything about iOS?
I, so I just do Android. I can look at an iOS code base and I can kind of tell you what's going on. But I wouldn't be able to give you the detail that somebody that does iOS does. And likewise vice versa. But all the projects that I've done have an Android app and an iOS app, and in most instances, you work really closely with both teams. And I wouldn't say one is harder than the other at all. I would say they're both just as hard, or both just as easy, depending on how you look at it. There's differences when you go to building stuff that in Android, there's certain things you can do that you can't do in iOS. So like I have personal apps that I've produced and they're on the Play Store, and there's no iOS version of the app. One, because I don't build iOS apps, but two, because you can't do it because the infrastructure doesn't allow you to do those things. But in terms of easy or hard or anything like that, they're both just as hard. It's kind of like a question saying, you know, is I don't know, building websites harder than building apps? Like they're both just as easy and both just as hard depending on your level of knowledge, but they're not particularly one's more difficult than the other.
I noticed on your website that you have a what do you call it? A Saturday school where you have people come in and you provide them a small environment, I think, where you're teaching them everything you know about app development, and you charge them
Yeah.
a pretty good sum of money, and then it's a 1 day class, kind of a boot camp thing, is it?
Yeah, so it was pre-COVID because I wanted to do it in person. So it was pre-COVID and it was a 2 day weekend boot camp, which was, I called it Android Finishing School, which is basically, you know, you've learned all this, like you've got tons of skills and you know all the different SDKs and you know loads of stuff. But you haven't got real world experience. And so, like I said, go out and build your own experience. But my 2 day boot camp was basically, here's everything I know that people that are hiring contractors are looking for. So rather than you going and learning everything under the sun, or just building things because you've learnt this new API and you think it's useful, it was basically a 2-day boot camp where I would talk you through. These are the most popular SDKs, so make sure you know those because everybody's going to be asking you if you know those. These are the most popular way to do things. These are the reasons why you might want to do things that aren't recommended in the Android guidelines, but they're really useful when you're developing cross teams as opposed to what you might be used to, which is just developing for yourself. So it was that kind of thing. But yeah, it was pre-COVID. Like talking about it now, I could totally, or I could have at least tried to do it on Zoom. But at the time, I was very much like I wanted to interact with people. So
Right. Okay, here's a question that comes in. It says, as you were doing a contract work, did you ever get offered a full-time job from a company? And if so, was it a good salary? What was your reaction to any offers that were full-time?
sure. So the only one that I can think of that outright asked me was the first, or maybe the second. So I worked for the sports social network that I mentioned earlier, and after 9 months, they were basically wanting to get permanent staff in, and they wanted me to stay on. And they offered, I don't know what the salary was. I think it was fairly competitive, but one, it was really, the office was an hour and a half both ways from where I lived, so that was, I wasn't into that. Two, I was kind of done because I really wanted to go traveling. And being an employee, I wouldn't have had that freedom to be like, hey, I'm going away for 2 months. And three, I think a big part of it was that the salary was good, but they wanted to also offer me equity, but the equity was like 0.025%. And in their minds, they were going to be $1 billion company, right? So they were selling it to you like, well, this 0.0 whatever percent is actually going to be worth £5 million. But that obviously didn't come to fruition. And at the time, it was for me like, it wasn't that I didn't have faith in the company. I think it was mostly like I didn't care that much. Like I wasn't that excited about the product at that point. It was fun to start working on it, and then after a while, that's another reason why I like freelancing is when you get bored, you don't have to tell your manager I quit. You just don't renew the contract, and you get to go and pick to work on something else. So that's the only instance I can think of where somebody outright asked me, "Do I want to stay?" And yeah, my answer to that was no. But it was fairly competitive. If I had been looking to go perm at the time, I might have taken it.
Okay, great. Uh, Here's another question. Everybody in this room is also facing that first job, and it's kind of scary. So, what challenges did you face as getting your first gig or your first contract? And it's obviously something that seems to be coming easy to you now. People are contacting you on LinkedIn. It wasn't that way, and it's not that way for any of us here that we're looking at right now.
Sure.
So, what's that challenge for the first job?
So the first job I got was through the first like professional getting paid to do it was through Upworks. Which if people aren't familiar is like a freelancing website for everything freelancing, right? Like programmers, photographers, voice actors, whatever. And it's the first and only gig that I've ever got on Upworks. So, Upworks is not the holy grail, but then at the same time, I think if you put the time in to learn how it properly works and it's kind of like building rapport, right? You get a bunch of different gigs, they give you good ratings. And now when somebody searches for this thing, you pop up and it says you've got 5-star ratings from 5 different people, so then you're more likely to get gigs. And I know people that get a lot of work through there, but that's how I got my first one. And I was kind of lucky because I found it, I pitched them, they were in London, I was in London, they wanted to meet someone face to face, they didn't want to hire it out to a different country and just get a product back. But the challenges that I faced was one, getting your foot on the ladder, and it helped that I had apps because I could at least say to them, like, yeah, like, hey, yes, I've never worked for anybody before, but I didn't have to say that. I could just be like, I'm an Android developer. Here's 5 apps that I've made. Here's one of them that appeared on Lifehacker. Here's one of them that appeared in the Guardian newspaper. And like those were all just cool, fun things, but those are things that you could do for yourself. So you can prove that you can do something. And then I think the other challenge was, at least for me, was that pricing. Like I ridiculously underpriced whatever it was that I charged them for that project. And it took way longer than it should have done because I wasn't good. Like I was okay, but I mean, I think one of the things about programming is, and I heard this from a few different people, is if you look at your code that you wrote a year ago and you don't think that is garbage, then you have not learned anything. And like thinking about the code that I write then is horrifying. Like right now I could have wrote that app in 5 days, and back then it probably took me 3 months. Um, but I think, yeah, the hardest thing is finding work. And in terms of finding work, I really feel like a big part of it comes down to just building portfolio. Because like I said, like the previous job that I was at, I was helping them hire and I was interviewing candidates that were going to be on the Android team, and I was interviewing candidates who were going to be on the iOS team. And when you get someone's CV come through, like I wasn't looking at their CV and like, oh, they worked for this company. Let me Google the company. Let me go on LinkedIn and make sure that they actually worked for this company. Like I just want to know what you did. And if you've got on your CV 3 different items from the last 9 months and it happens to be things that you built, then I don't care. Like I can go and look at, okay, cool, yeah, he's got experience. Let's talk to him and see if he knows what he's talking about, or she. So I would say the hardest thing is getting your foot in the door, but as soon as your foot is in the door, then there's no going back.
So would you recommend offering a pretty low fee then, just to get your first job? Is that
I
the
think
price you have to pay?
I think that might be. I think it depends, right? Like if you're going to build an app for somebody on Upworks for $10, then the answer is no. Like that's just not worth your time. So it might be, let's say, an average rate for whatever that project is $3,000. So you offer 1,000 because you've like 1,000 is super cheap. They should take it at that offer, and now you've got one person or one company that can say so and so worked for me. They're really good. And I feel like at the start the money, like it shouldn't be that much of a hit because you have no expectations of anything else. So it's not like you're stepping down. Really, you're going from $0 to whatever it is you bid for your first contract. So like maybe I take that statement back. If you have to bid $10 to get the contract, then it's fine. But bid the $10 once. Don't bid it twice, because if you get two contracts for $10, you are wasting your time. Like the $10 should get you onto the $1,000, which should get you onto the next one,
Uh,
and it should be going on from there.
How about just do like for a volunteer for a you know
100%.
a local nonprofit that needs some help?
Yep, yep, 100%. Like even now, I got approached yesterday by I think it was a university, or a part of a university in the UK, because somebody listened to my podcast and their manager is looking to build an app for their team, and so they approached me and they said, we have X amount of money, and I told them like X amount of money. I think it was like £200. I was like, you're not going to get a junior developer for one day for £200, but I would totally build it for them, because it's just like, for me, it would take me a day. I'm not going to lose money because right now I've just finished my contract and I'm essentially just like chilling and working on my own stuff. So it's just, and it's going to help them out massively. So I might end up doing that. So I feel like, yeah, if you get the opportunity to do it, and like working for or building something, really building anything is super cool when you see other people using it. So if it's for a charity or a nonprofit, or if you know that you're helping somebody out and you know that that's another thing to add to your portfolio, then yeah, sure, do it.
Okay. Here's another issue: is I've noticed in the age groups of who's a developer is that it skews very young. So I'm saying that like 50% of the developers are like under 30 years old or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And developers seem to kind of quit and go off and do management things, or they become entrepreneurs, or
Yeah.
instead of coding all the time, you grow up and you become the team lead, which is more about direction and managing people.
Yeah.
So, as a contractor, do you see a future for a long term, or is that a kind of a, a step in a different direction someday?
Sure. That's a really good question. So I would say personally, I think personally and professionally, the way that I look at it is like, I've been contracting since 2012. So since 2012, I've worked on, I don't know, 20, 30 different apps for different companies, right? So all I've been doing is building experience and getting more knowledge and building network and learning new things, because I'm working with iOS developers and I'm working with backend developers and all this kind of stuff. So I would say, like, kind of to answer your question, personally, if I wanted to get a role tomorrow as, you know, a tech manager, it's a whole different skill set, but I have a bunch of experience behind me. And so the previous role that I was just in, I came in as an Android developer. And then they realized like, hey, Rob knows a lot more than just Android development. And I became the lead Android developer. And I think if I had stayed with that company and gone on permanent, I could have been something else. So I think like being a freelancer definitely doesn't put you in a box. And I would also say, to the age thing, like most of the developers that I work with that are really good are around like 30 to 35. And I would say the reason that that happens is because, they've put in the time since at development became a big thing. So that's kind of the age range. But then I would also say there's a lot of older developers who have been changing things throughout their career. You know, they used to be web, and then whatever they did in web died. So then they became Flash developers, and then Flash died. And so then they became, you know, Microsoft Phone developers, and then Microsoft Phone died, and they became something else. And again, like they've that's four different career paths right there, but each one lends itself to the next thing. So I feel like a lot of people go and become entrepreneurs, or in like specifically for my role, you'd become a lead developer, you'd become CTO or something. Like the last place I worked, there's one guy who was, I won't say too much because I don't know if he's going to get in trouble if he ever sees this or if somebody sees this, but he's going to end up being CTO when he leaves there of a different startup. And he's much the same level as me, and he's always been a freelancer. So, you know, I feel like basically what in this industry, what counts as experience, and permanent freelance, all that kind of stuff doesn't affect how much experience you have or have gained.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, has there ever been a situation where you've been offered a contract and for one reason or another you just said, "This just looks bad. I'm going to walk away." Not necessarily because it was cheap, but you just. Here's the bottom line question: is how can a student here that you're talking to see a bad job offer when it's offered to them? What should we be scared of when you get an offer?
Great question. I would say the same as you should be scared of anything else. Well, two things. One, if it's too good to be true. And two, if it's blatantly going to be a horrible experience. So the only one time I can think that I turned the contract down. So I turn contracts down daily, not I don't get offers daily, but I get approached daily to say, hey, would you like to apply for this contract with this company? And regularly I'm like, no, because for me, red flags are they want to treat you as an employee. So I'm not an employee, right? When you're a contractor, when you're an employee, you start, let's say you go into an office, you start at 9 o'clock, you finish at 5 o'clock, you get an hour lunch break. And, you know, you can take coffee breaks and stuff in between, but people are going to start looking at you funny if you take too many. If you're a freelancer, like I'm supposed to start at 9 o'clock, I might start at 9:30. I'm supposed to finish at 5, I might finish at 4:30. You know, I might every hour go for a 15-minute walk, like, you know, everybody tells you that you're supposed to. And nobody's going to say anything to me because one, I'm not a permanent member of staff, and two, I'm delivering the exact amount of work that they expect me to deliver regardless. And so the times that I would turn job offers down is when I know that they're not employing me because they see my skill set as something that they really need to bring their app to the next level or get it done faster. They're employing me because they want someone that they can say, hey, Rob, go do this. And then 10 minutes later, hey, Rob, actually, no, go do this. Hey, Rob, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Where have you been? You know, you get an hour lunch break, but we expect everybody to work, all those kind of things. So for me, those are the red flags. And then the other ones are where it seems too good to be true. We're going to pay you loads of money. It's going to be super easy. You know, you can work when you want, and all of those kind of things. Those are the ones. Those are the two ones that scares me. One is preference, and one is just like nobody. Like there's nothing that's too good to be true.
So like over here, everyone has Glassdoor as their way to
Yeah,
see inside a company. Do you have something
yeah,
similar so you can get an idea of who you're getting involved with?
yeah. I think likewise here, Glassdoor for the bigger companies is definitely one. People definitely use it. Specifically, I don't use it. I mostly the way that well, I mean, kind of the way that I vet a company is through the first interview process and what it's like. So I've been to companies where as soon as you go in, you know, they're like, hey, how you doing? Whatever. And then they've obviously gone to Google and got a list of questions that I should ask somebody that knows Java, or questions that I should ask an iOS developer. And straight away they start asking me questions that I can't answer. And I've said this to people in interviews before. It's like, I don't know the answer to the question that you're asking me that you got from Google, but I 100% know if you tell me what you actually want me to do, I can go build it. So those are the kind of ways that I vet people is what is the conversation like? What is the interview process like? Do they seem like people that I would like to work for? And if the answer to that question is no, then the answer is no, because you know that's one of the things that you hear from people that have employees is, you know, oh, I hate my boss, or oh, my colleague is, you know, terrible and he's disrupting the whole team. And as a freelancer, like you pick and choose who you want to work for. So why should you pick and choose someone that you feel like is going to be a bad idea? And I've also worked in companies where they get freelancers in that are really like they're great at programming and they are terrible at everything else. and it ruins a team. And in those scenarios, like, you should be able to tell from the interview, like, both ways. Are you going to be a good fit, and are they going to be a good fit for you?
Very good. Have you ever walked away from a contract after you'd been there for 2 weeks?
No, I've never. That's the other thing I like about contracts, is that I particularly like short ones. So even if I hate it, I can do 3 months and leave, and I won't have to quit. The only contract that I've ever finished early was one. We finished the work super early, and I remember saying to the guy, like, "Is there anything else you want me to do? Because there's a month left on my contract, and I have nothing to do." And he told me to go on YouTube. So I was like, "All right, cool." So I did that, but there's this thing in the UK called IR35. It's a government thing. So when you're a contractor, you operate under your own business, and so the laws and all this kind of stuff applies slightly different to you, as opposed to just being a regular employee where, you know, you just get a paycheck, all the tax is done for you and all that kind of stuff. And so part of the IR35 thing is, as a contractor, you can pay yourself in a way that you pay less tax. But if they deem you to be an employee disguised as a contractor, and a disguise would be, you know, you have to start at these specific times, you only get an hour lunch break, you're not allowed to take holiday, all this kind of stuff, then the government can come to you and say, listen, I know that you're saying you're a contractor, but you're obviously not, so give us all that tax money. So I worked at this company where they wanted copies of our passports, and they wanted something else because they wanted to put us in the system like they did a regular employee. And it was me and an iOS developer. And we were like, no. And so basically they kept saying to us, if you don't give us this, we're going to have to, like, end the contract. And we both said, like, we're not doing it because we don't want to get in trouble with the government. And that contract, they ended up saying, they waited, but they basically waited until we had finished the work. And then when they were like, oh, we're really sorry, but if you can't give us your passports right now, you have to leave. So we both left and we went to the pub, and that was the end of that one.
Okay. Hey, we're going to be running out of time, so I just want to give you a chance to tell us about your current project. I'm going to bring up something on my screen that shows your website. You have a podcast going on, and can you see that here? This is called, what's it called? Coffee and Coding.
Coffee and Coding.
So tell us about this project and how it would help a student here. What could we get out of this?
All right, sure, yeah. So the Coffee and Coding podcast is something that I started, I think, in March. The idea was kind of a mash between how I built this and Entrepreneur on Fire, if anybody's familiar with those podcasts. I really wanted to interview independent developers and get them to tell their stories, and it didn't end up that way. I basically talked to really, at least in my opinion, interesting tech people all over tech that relates to app development. So I've talked to iOS developers, I've talked to Android developers that make their living, like a really good living, full-time, just building one Android app and selling it really well. I've talked to people that are CTOs, I've talked to people in cybersecurity. So I guess how it could help people here is, like, specifically the ones talking about app development. It's really interesting to just hear other people's perspective other than mine, and different. Also, I find it really interesting because there's so many different avenues of making a living in app development, because not everyone does app development. Like, there's one guy who I've co-hosted a few episodes with him now. He has a huge YouTube channel, and he basically learned Android, started recording YouTube videos teaching exactly what he just learned. And now if you go on YouTube and you type in Android development, he's going to be the top result. And that's how he makes his living. And I don't think he's ever worked for a company building apps in his life. So things like that, there's lots of different avenues to go. And personally, I just like podcasts. So if you like podcasts and you like, you know, a fine line between nerdy and interesting, then that's probably, it might be interesting for you.
All right. Well, I'll give you a plug. For my students here, I've listened to all 18 episodes, and they're all good, and they're getting better. Very insightful people that are experts in their particular knowledge areas. So it's not just about freelancing and apps. It's about all kinds of issues related to software development. So computer science students would find it very relevant. So how do we subscribe? Do we just go to this webpage? Is that the best way to find it? Or do you go to...
Yeah, coffeeandcodingpod.com is the short link. It will take you here. And then if you scroll down a bit, it's got all the links to Apple Podcasts and Podchaser and anywhere you can get podcasts. Otherwise, whatever you use for your podcast app, type in Coffee and Coding, and it should, if I've done my job right, it should come up. So
Okay. And if we donate you some coffee, that'll keep you alive for a little while.
I mean, it will keep me awake. Like
Okay.
that's the extent that will do.
Very good. Okay, so there you can see it right now. We've got Flutter was the subject for number 19. 18 was a guy from Microsoft, was it? That
Yeah, yeah,
Internet of
Microsoft, yeah.
Things.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
very relevant to our computer science students. And then, of course, here we've got a legacy app from, a very
This guy, I
successful.
think he was a Brazilian app developer. So that was really interesting because app development all over the world, like the industry is so different.
Okay, so a year from now, we're going to see episode 52. Is that the idea?
I mean, I'm aiming for episode 55, and that was my challenge to myself 1 year. And then after that, if I still like it, I'm still going, and if not, episode 55 is the last one.
Oh, you're going to stop.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I won't. I'm enjoying it so far, but the
Okay.
very minimum I need to get to is 55 to like satisfy my own like, yeah.
Okay, so how many people listen?
That's a great question. So I think it's a lot less than you would think. I think the last episode maybe like 200. Some of them have got to like 500 in the first week. It really depends because I don't have a big social media following and I don't heavily promote the podcast. So it really depends who I have on. And if they have a big following, one tweet from them to listen to it and suddenly everybody floods in. But it's going up and up. I heard on a podcast the other day, I think it was the Buzzsprout one, that they said from their statistics, if you get more than 1,000 downloads a month, no, 1,000 downloads in the last 30 days, then you are in the top 90% of podcasts. So I'm going to take that as I'm in the top 10% or the top 10% of podcasts in the world.
Okay.
So I'm going to take that.
Well, usually the rule is if you create something good and do it consistently, the people will eventually show up and find you. So
That is what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
I think you've got the right product, and you've got everybody here that should be interested in these subjects that you're talking about. So you're hitting the right audience.
Awesome.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to put this on YouTube as well. I've got
Sure.
lots of subscribers, and hopefully some of them find you as well. So
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, please do.
okay. All right. Well, I think we're out of time here. Class is going to end soon. So I appreciate everybody coming, and thanks to Rob, and best of luck on your next contract and the one after. So thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thank you. I just wanted to say as well, if anybody does want to ask me any more questions or anything like that, you can find me on LinkedIn. Is probably the best place to get me if you just type in Rob Joseph. And if you message me, I'll reply. So